سعيد أن أكون في وسطكم. I'm very happy to be here with you. My colleague and I are really thankful for Joshua and Johnson for inviting us to be here in Malaysia. And we are really impressed by the Malaysian people, your kindness, your generosity, and your solidarity with the Palestinian people. So we are really, our hearts are full for thanks to you, to your government, to the people of Malaysia for your kindness to the Palestinian people and also their cause. Can you hear me all right, or should I get this closer to me? All right. Very good. Okay. So I am going to share with you about peace and justice and how we can promote peace and justice. This program, really, I have done it in the United States, in several states in the United States, about 15 different states. I went and spoke about the possibility of peace in the Holy Land. I wanted time to adjust it to Malaysia a little bit, but I didn't have enough time. That's good. That's good. Oh, this is recording it? All right. I thought this is the remote control. All right, that's okay. That's okay. All right. I have only 30 minutes, so I really need to rush. Okay, here we go. Who's going to change that one? Okay. So why seek peace? Why seek peace? Here is the question. Why do we, whether we are Palestinians, Malaysians, Americans, Chinese, whatever we are, why do we want peace? Why do we seek peace? And what happened in New Zealand last week is an example of why we need peace. To stop violence, bloodshed, and destruction that has been going on for too many years. And today, what we learned from what happened in New Zealand, it could happen anywhere and to anybody. It could happen to Muslims, to Christians, to Jews, to Buddhists, to Hindus. Anybody can be a victim of violence today in the world. This is where my family and I live in Jerusalem. This is an old picture of Jerusalem, quite old. It's really about 150 years old. But you can see how Jerusalem looked like many, many years ago. Actually, this is my neighborhood in Jerusalem when I was a child, until 1948. And where you see that circle, that's where I was born, in West Jerusalem. Now, how far is this from Damascus Gate and from the Dome of the Rock? From my neighborhood, I could be at the window. Oh, sorry, we are not coordinating. We are not coordinating. Okay, let me just. Okay, I think I got a different program, but I'll catch up with you.
Yeah, it's okay.
I'll catch up with you. So. Okay, go back a little, where it says why seek peace.
It's connecting to your computer.
So people will see what I see. Okay. We can take this out. Oh yeah, right. that's very good. Okay, thank you. Okay, I was talking and you were seeing a different picture, and I didn't realize that. Okay, so this is Jerusalem, and this is the Jerusalem in my neighborhood in Jerusalem, and from there I can see the Dome of the Rock. These are my grandparents. There are people from Jerusalem. The lady on the right is my grandmother. Her name is Nadira. And the man next to her, her husband, is called Musa, which means Moses. And we are a Jerusalem, ancient Jerusalem family that lived in the Holy Land for many, many generations. We belong to the Greek Orthodox Church. So this is the Church of Nativity where Jesus was born. And these are Greek Orthodox priests at the Church of Nativity. This is a church that my great-great-father built in Jerusalem. And if you enter the church, you see this description. It says in Arabic, لذكر المرحوم الكافلير اسكندر بيك عوض المحسن إلى هذه الكنيسة. So I am called after his name. My name is Alex Awad. His name is Iskandar Awad. But it shows that my great-great-grandfather built a church in Yafa, near Tel Aviv. I wrote a story of my family in a book called Palestinian Memories, the story of the Palestinian mother and her people. And Joshua and Jason have a copy of my book if you are interested in looking at it later. Okay, this is my mother. She was born in Jerusalem in 1916, and she died in 2006. So she lived for 90 years of all the ups and downs of the Arab-Israeli conflict. In 1948, her husband, my father, was shot and killed in the first Arab-Israeli conflict in 1948. And soon after, we became refugees. She was a committed Christian woman, and her motto was never look back, always look forward. Never ask why God, always ask how God. Never harbor hatred against anybody in your heart. Always forgive, even forgive your enemies. So that's an amazing for a Palestinian woman who loses her husband. She's left with 7 children. She became a refugee, and yet she is willing to forgive. Here is my family. Can you guess where I am in that picture? Well, I make it easy for you. I'm the one with the black hair. No, that didn't work. All right, it didn't work. Okay, I'm the one to the extreme left here. All right, that's me. And that's my family. My father was killed. My mother had to put us in orphanages and in boarding schools until we graduated from high school. 2 of my brothers at their school in Jerusalem. So my mother, in 1948, decided not to take us to a refugee camp. Instead, she just went to college with 7 children to work on her nursing degree until she became a registered nurse. Back to our subject, why peace? Well, you know what happened to my family, the death of my father, us becoming refugees, makes me, even when I was a child, to want peace. Because what happened to me and to my family, I didn't want it to happen to anyone else. I didn't want any Muslims, Christians, or Jews to lose parents and to become refugees. And that's why I want peace. Also, we need to remember that peace in Israel, Palestine is possible. Some people think that the Arabs and the Jews will never hammer their problems and make peace. I don't believe that. I believe peace is possible. You know, most people in the Soviet Union never thought that the Soviet Union will collapse. If you would have asked them before it collapsed, they'll say never, never in a million years it would collapse, but it did collapse. If you would ask South Africa before Nelson Mandela, if they think that South Africa will end apartheid, they'll say never, but actually they did end apartheid. So I believe that peace in the Holy Land is possible. and should be possible, but it depends on you and I to work for peace in the Holy Land. So why seek peace? Violence, death, and destruction on the streets of Jerusalem, Bethlehem, and Gaza impacts Muslims, Jews, and Christians everywhere. Imagine more than half of the population of our world is either Muslims, Christians, and Jews. They all look at the situation in the Holy Land. When it is violence in the Holy Land, it stirs Christians, Muslims, and Jews all over the world. If we make peace in the Holy Land, it can bring goodwill and harmony to Christians, Jews, Muslims all over the world, which is almost 3/4 of the world's population. That's why we should never give up on peace. Lack of peace in the Holy Land is hindering interreligious dialogue. Sometimes Jews, Christians, and Muslims, they like to come together and have interfaith dialogue. But as long as there is occupation in the Holy Land, as long as there is no peace in the Holy Land, it's very hard to have meaningful interfaith dialogue. Because how can I dialogue with a Jewish person who's taking my land and killing my children? It's very difficult, very difficult. That's why we say to our Israeli and Jewish brothers and sisters, please let us make peace so that interfaith dialogue will work in the world. Now we have to realize that we are part of the problem. When I say we are part of the problem, I mean we Christians. We Christians are part of the problem because the policies of some of the Christian countries create violence in the world, create wars in the world. So we need to take responsibility and understand that all of us, in a way, whether we are Christians, Muslims, or Jews, we are part of the problem, but we can also be a part of the solution. We are called to be peacemakers. I know the Quran calls all Muslims to be peacemakers. Even the word Islam has to do with the word salam. And in Christianity, Jesus said, blessed are the peacemakers. In Arabic, Tuba lisani'i as-salam. Well, this is a place in Jerusalem, is one of the reasons why there is so much conflict in the Holy Land. This area, we call it Haram al-Sharif and Sakhrat, or Qubbat al-Sakhra. This area is holy for Muslims. It's holy for Christians. It's holy for Jews. Sometimes I liken it to a beautiful girl, very beautiful girl, but she has 3 lovers. That makes a problem, right? You know? And the same with Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a beautiful city, it's a holy city, but Christians, Muslims, and Jews love Jerusalem. We need to find a way how to express our love to Jerusalem in a very positive and a very good way. But what you see in this picture is the Dome of the Rock in the yellow, and also Qubbat al-Sakhra, the one which is down, that is Al-Haram al-Sharif, or Al-Aqsa, Masjid Al-Aqsa. Unfortunately today, many Jews are calling for destroying the Islamic shrines and building a Jewish temple in place of the Islamic shrine. And this is a replica of what the Jewish people would like to build in place of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. Some Israeli members of the Knesset are openly, publicly calling for the destruction of the Islamic shrines in Jerusalem. That makes not only Palestinian Muslims angry, but also Palestinian Christians, because we feel that all the holy places are our national heritage, and we don't want to lose our national heritage. Mahmoud Abbas, the Palestinian president, It says, Israel seeks to build holy temple instead of Al-Aqsa. The chairman accuses Israel of trying to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque by allowing Jews to pray on the temple now. Almost every week, there are confrontations between Israeli soldiers and Israeli settlers, and also the Muslims who are guarding Al-Aqsa, because the Israeli settlers and the fanatic Israelis, they want to go to Al-Aqsa and do much trouble. Jewish members of Knesset called for the building of a third Jewish temple in Jerusalem. 1/3 of Israeli Jews want the temple rebuilt in Jerusalem. Among religious Jews, questions 43% support reconstruction of a Jewish shrine. However, the poll also revealed that more than 31% among Israeli secular Jews also support such an initiative. Well, I'm trying to say, you know, when you see the Palestinians angry, this is the reason why they are angry. Because their holy shrines in Jerusalem, not only their holy shrine, but also all their land, you know, is under threat by the Israeli authorities and by the Jewish settlers. And that is why they are so furious and angry. And this expresses Palestinian anger. When you see a Palestinian young man throwing stones at Israeli soldiers or burning tires, you may ask why. Well, it is because of the threat on Al-Aqsa Mosque and also because of all the injustices that the Israeli authorities are doing against Palestinians. Unrest in the Middle East, future wars and bloody conflicts, end of the church in the Holy Land, and the Middle East, failure of future peace initiative. Right now there is no peace process. And that's because of all the conflict in the Holy Land. So, I told you I'm going to talk about 10 ways to make peace. Here is number 1. All of this was an introduction. Okay, here's number 1. Draw on your spiritual resources. You are Muslims. Most of you here are Muslims. Draw on your spiritual resources from the Quran and from the Hadith that talk about peace. And I would say to the Christians, also draw on your spiritual resources. For example, in Ephesians chapter 6, verse 12, it says, "For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the powers of the dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." So we need to depend on God because there are spiritual forces against peace. Also in the book of Zechariah, it says, "Not by might, nor by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord Almighty." When we see injustice, we cannot only face it with our strength and with our muscle. We need the help of God. Number 2, commit to justice and peace for both Israelis and Palestinians. When we try to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict, we cannot take side with one group and totally ignore the other group. Peace means making peace for both Israelis and Palestinians, Muslims, Christians, and Jews. Everybody should be able to eat the fruit of peace and be satisfied. Educate yourself about the situation in the Holy Land. And here's how to educate yourself. Examine the claims. There are Jewish claims, there are Christian claims, there are Muslim claims. Examine these claims. Beware false assumptions. Look at the maps. Study your resolutions. Follow what's happening on the ground. Get your news from reliable sources such as Haaretz, Al-Monitor, Jewish Voice for Peace, and your religious publications, whether you are Muslim or Christian. Here are some false assumptions. All Arabs are Muslims. Well, I'm an Arab, but I'm an Arab Christian. I'm a Palestinian Arab Christian. So not all Arabs are Muslims. Not all Palestinians are Muslims. Arabs and Jews are eternal enemies. That's not true. Arabs and Jews have lived together in many parts of the world for about 1,400 years in relative harmony. Jews are descendants of Isaac, while Arabs are descendants of Ishmael. Well, that was maybe 3,000 years ago, but not today. Most Arabs have nothing to do with the blood of Ishmael. They became Arabs by Arabization, by learning the Arabic language and adapting to the Arabic culture. Most Jews today have nothing to do with the blood of Isaac. Arabs and Palestinians will never rest until they destroy Israel. That is a false assumption. Today, if you give the Palestinians a fair peace solution, they will accept it. Today they'll accept it. They will not wait until tomorrow. Jews are God's chosen people. Today we are all God's chosen people. God doesn't make a distinction between one race and the other race. So learn the facts, look at the maps, study UN resolutions. Here are the maps. I will go quickly through the maps because my time is limited. This is the map that the Zionists gave to the British in 1919, saying this is what we want. Yes? I tell you what I'll do. I'm willing to leave this PowerPoint with Joshua for anybody who wants it. You can have the whole thing. You can have it, all right? Yeah. Okay, look at the maps. This is the map in 1919. The Jewish agency gave it to the British, and they said, this is what we want, a Jewish state in Palestine. This is the map of the British mandate on Palestine from 1919 to 1948. The land was called Palestine, and all the people who lived there were called Palestinians, Palestinian Muslims, Palestinian Christians, or Palestinian Jews. They were living together in harmony before the bill for declaration. Then the United Nations decided to partition Palestine in 1947. The map on the left shows the partition of the United Nations. That did not help the Palestinians. They were the majority of the people. They were given less than 50% of the land. And so that started the first Arab-Israeli war. And this is the consequence of the war, the second map. Now Israel from the United Nations got everything in the yellow, and in the war they get everything in the red. What was left for the Palestinians are the shaded areas, the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. All of these dots are Palestinian towns and villages that were either destroyed or depopulated by the Israelis in 1948. And the people who lived in these towns became refugees. They had to run away from their homes, and they could not go back to their homes. And the Israelis created the refugee problem to about 800,000 Palestinians in 1948. This became the map in 1949. 1967, another round of war. Israel took from Syria the Golan Heights on top of the map, from Jordan, the West Bank, and from Egypt, the Gaza Strip and the Sinai Peninsula. Here is the West Bank. Today, the West Bank is the main reason why there is no peace between Israelis and Palestinians. And it's not the fault of the Palestinians. The Israelis are coming to the West Bank, confiscating Palestinian land and building Jewish settlements right on Palestinian land. These Jewish settlements have become the biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East. This is the Oslo Agreement, and they decided to give the small circle, the Jericho area, and the big circle, the Gaza Strip, back to the Palestinians as part one of the Oslo Agreement. This is the second part of the Oslo Agreement. Israel decided to build a wall to separate it from Palestinians, but 95% of the wall is built on Palestinian land, quite often dividing Palestinians from Palestinians. So you can see, this is how Palestine used to be, and the last map it shows how Palestinian is today. And it keeps shrinking because the Israelis continue to confiscate Palestinian land and make it part of Greater Israel. Here I'm having a point here. Ask tough questions. When you deal with the Arab-Israeli conflict, when you have Israelis and Palestinians before you, don't be afraid to ask tough questions. In order to get the answers for you to have, you need to ask tough questions. Do Arab countries want to make peace with Israel, or are they against to make peace with Israel? The Arab Saudi Peace Initiative of 2002 shows the initiative calls for normalizing relations between the Arab region and Israel in exchange for a full withdrawal by Israel from the occupied territories, including East Jerusalem. What I'm trying to say, all Arab countries decided they want to make peace with Israel if Israel will withdraw from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. That's called the Arab Peace Initiative of 2002. The Israelis took that peace initiative and tore it to pieces and put it in the trash can. Anybody who says that the Arab countries don't want peace with Israel, they don't know what they are talking about. What is the Israeli peace plan? Does Israel have a peace plan? The truth about it, Israel does not have a peace plan. I call it the Israeli dilemma. Many Israelis are against the one-state solution. Most Israeli leaders are against the two-state solution. So if you ask the Israelis on the street, they'll say, oh, we want two-state solution. If you ask the leaders like Netanyahu, he would say, not on my watch, I'll never accept a Palestinian state in the West Bank. And that is what I call the Israeli dilemma. And at the same time, it is the Palestinian nightmare. And it's a challenge for us as peacemakers. If the situation in the West Bank is terrible, in the Gaza Strip, it is 10 times worse. The Gaza Strip is totally surrounded by Israelis from all sides, and from the south, it is surrounded by Egypt. 2 million Palestinians live in poverty in the Gaza Strip. So I would say also get to the bottom line. Try to, once you know the Arab-Israeli conflict, try to summarize it in a sentence. Here is my sentence, but you can have your own sentence. Palestinians want to end the conflict because they have the most to gain from signing a peace agreement with Israel. The Israeli government is trapped in the grip of fanatic Israeli ideologues who prefer the acquisition of land in the West Bank to making peace with Palestinians. This is the Arab-Israeli conflict in a nutshell. The bottom line again, and here I talk with American groups in the United States, and this is what I tell them. The United States is unable to broker peace between Israelis and Palestinians because the US lawmakers abide by the dictates of AIPAC, American Israeli Political Action Committee, which supports the radical policies of the Israeli right, like the radical policies of Netanyahu and his colleagues. Number 5, confront injustice, whatever it may be, whether it's injustice in New Zealand, injustice to Muslims in Myanmar, injustice to Palestinians, injustice to Jews. Wherever you see injustice, we need to confront injustice. In Palestine, the Christians have came up with what we call the Kairos Palestine document in order to confront injustice through a Christian perspective. So you can Google this, the Kairos Palestine document, and you can read how the Palestinian Christians in the Holy Land are trying to solve the Arab-Israeli conflict. I believe in nonviolence as a way to resolve conflict. Nonviolence ended British colonial rule in India. Nonviolence terminated the South African apartheid regime. Nonviolence affected the collapse of the former Soviet Union. Nonviolence was instrumental to the success of the civil rights movement in the United States. And I believe the Palestinian people, Hamas, Fatah, and all the Palestinian factions need to use nonviolence as a means to end the occupation of their land. Part of nonviolence, I support what we call the BDS program. B stands for boycott, D for divestment, and S for sanctions. If you never heard about the BDS program, please look it up in your computer and learn about it. It's a worldwide effort by Palestinians and people who love to free Palestine to try to divest from Israeli companies and also boycott Israeli companies that are doing business in the West Bank. Educate grassroots. Here I have the word America, but you can take it off and put grassroots Malaysia. All right? Educate grassroots Malaysia. Educate in the people in Malaysia so they know the reality about what's happening in the Holy Land. I thank God because you know more about the Palestinian issue than your friends in the United States. Because your friends in the United States, they have closed eyes because their media tells them all the time how good Israel is and how democratic Israel is, and it doesn't tell them about the real situation in the Holy Land. Here, your government, your media is much better than in the United States. Thank God for that. But teach your people about the reality that's happening in the ground. Okay, here I have America. You can translate it to Malaysia. Malaysians have the right to know. And also, as far as my perspective, the church has a unique mandate to educate, since the church is called to be a peacemaker and a reconciler. I would like to take the word church out of here and put the mosque, all right, or Islamic centers. Islamic centers have a unique mandate to educate, since the Islamic centers and the mosques are called to be peacemakers and reconcilers. Amen to that? All right, good. Very soft, amen. Okay, challenge Christian Zionism. How is my time? When it is 30 minutes, let me know. I'll quit.
You can have 1 hour.
I have 1 more minute. Okay, in this minute, I'll just tell you the titles. Number 7, challenge Christian Zionism. There are a group in the world called Christian Zionists, especially in the United States. Christian Zionists, these are Christians who are in full support of the state of Israel. And I feel as a Christian Palestinian, my job is to try to challenge Christian Zionism, and I urge you to learn about it in order you can also challenge it. All right, I have a definition here for Christian Zionism, but I don't have time for it. Here is one Christian Zionist quotation. This is a chart I use to try to challenge Christian Zionism. Joshua, maybe one day we can print that chart, and anybody who'd like to have it, you can have a copy of that chart. Number 8, engage members of your government. In the United States, I would say engage members of Congress. Means knock at the door of Congress and try to tell them about Palestinian rights. But here, this is not so much needed as it is in the United States. Number 1, respond immediately. When you hear about something happening in Palestine, don't wait a month or 2 to respond to it. The sooner you respond, the more effective you can be. If you wait, then another thing happens, and another thing happens. So the sooner you respond is better. And you know, all of these people are trying to make the peace of the century, you know, or the deal of the century in Palestine. It's not going to work, and we need Malaysia to help us. We need the Malaysian government to outdo what Trump and his colleagues are trying to do. Create a peace deal that is only good for Israel, but not good for the Palestinians. We need your help, especially next month when Donald Trump announces the deal of the century. Finally, work with others. Try to make a task force, try to make a committee in your neighborhood, in your mosque, in your school, in your university, that will stand for justice and for the rights of all Israelis, all Muslims, all Jews, all Christians in the Holy Land. Work for others, create a movement that will make sure there will be peace for all in the Holy Land. Act to alleviate suffering and stay hopeful. And I have signs of hope. My time is gone? Okay, God bless you. I'm going to quit. No, I don't want to do what you do. Thank you for listening to me.